Lumin, for those of you who have never heard of this company, they're known for making high-end streamers. Now, when I say high-end, the streamer I have here today, the T2, is about 6,000 Canadian. Now, what you probably didn't know, for those of you who know this company, is that they actually produce one high-end power amp. Now, you know what? I don't know if I should criticize them or should I praise them for calling this amp, amp. That's the model number. So, are they being lazy or are they being creative to call this amp, amp? I don't know. But you know what? In this video, I'm just going to call it the Lumin AMP. Now, we're talking about something that's quite high-end. It's 13,000 USD, right? It's the kind of price where you go like, should I buy the car or should I buy a power amp? It's not for everyone, but I thought about it, how to make this video, and hopefully there's something for everyone in this video. Over the years, I've gone through about 60-70 power amps and integrated amps. Either I tested it at my home or at my friend's place extensively. Not the kind where I just go to an audio show and listen to it, but really spend time listening to it. Now, the power amps I've tried range from a few $100s to about 50 grand. Now, one thing I noticed is that with power amps, it's actually easy to impress me with the budget ones. It's actually easy to review the budget ones as opposed to high-end ones. Because when I review a budget power amp, if it does just a bit better than what I expect, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like a giant killer. While on the other hand, high-end power amp, it can do amazing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I expect that. What do you want? It's 10 grand. You should do at least that. So it's actually very difficult to wow me when it comes to high-end gear. Now, there's one thing that this Lumin does that wow me. And today, we're going to talk about it. Let me start by going over the specs of this Class AB amp. It outputs 160 watt. It has a custom low noise Toroidal power supply and features a completely separate dual mono power supply design. What's really nice is that the input impedance is really high. With RCA, you're looking at 100,000 ohms and XLR 200,000 ohms. Now, I wish I had this power amp when I had my Audio Research LS28. One of the challenge at the time for us was to find a power amp that can match well with the LS28. The frequency response is rated at 20 Hz to 40 kHz. Now finally, one of the specs that caught my attention was the output impedance. It's only 0.1 ohms. Now you don't usually see this listed in the specs of a power amp. So I spoke to Lumin about it and they told me that one of the benefits of having a low output impedance is that it allows the amp to drive difficult speakers easier. Okay. That's interesting because this amp had no problem driving any of the speakers I paired with. I had a long chat with Angus from Lumin and I had a lot of questions for him. Basically, my questions were, what makes your amp so special? Because we're talking about a $13,000 amp and we spent an hour chatting. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll highlight a few things that I think is interesting. Now, first, instead of using MOSFET, this amp uses BJT transistors for better bass and current control. Now, a lot of work has been put into designing this amp to deliver instantaneous current. The rise time for the signal going from 0 to 10 watt. And this is important because when I talk about how this amp sounds, remember this part, instantaneous power delivery. I don't think I've tried any amps in this price area that can do that. So that's number one. Another thing that I learned is that all amps have this voltage and current gain stage. Now, what I did not know is that most amps in the voltage gain stage use op-amp. When they design this power amp, they use discrete transistors. By using discrete transistor in the voltage gain stage and the current gain stage, they have better control on how they design and voice the amp. I was like, okay, it's interesting. But then they said, look, this kind of design you only find in very expensive power amp. I'm talking about crazy money power amp, and yet they use this kind of design in this power amp. I know $13,000 sounds like a lot of money. Well, no kidding, but usually it's even higher end power amp that use this kind of design. Now, there are a lot of other questions I asked, like, for example, why only 150 watts? Why not 500 watts? Why does it go up to 40 kilohertz? When you talk about biasing the amp for high def sound, what do you mean? So there are a lot of questions like that I asked, and for those of you who are interested in this amp, when you go to the store, you can ask them. It's quite interesting why. Now at this price, you expect the amp to sound fantastic. Yeah, for sure it sounds fantastic. The top end is really open. It's detailed, it's sharp, but it has the right amount of roundness to it that's very pleasant to the ear. It's not one of those rolled off amp to make it sound analog. It's all about clarity when it comes to this amp, but there's no harshness to it. And that's what's fantastic about it. Mid-range, not thin, lots of body. Once again, very clear. I would say even the mid-range is neutral. There's a bit of warmth to the amp, but the mid-range, I find it really neutral. The amp is fast, it's dynamic, it's lively. It's the kind of amp that makes you want to dance. The bass, I think, is one of its main strengths. Very good control, very detailed. In fact, I think that's probably one of the reasons I was so impressed with the Gershman Avant-Garde speakers bass, because there's a lot of detail in the bass. It's because I found this amp matches really well with it. Now, between you and me, telling you how the power amp sounds is like big whoop. I bet you I can find a power amp out there somewhere, $1,000. I can use the same description to describe that power amp as I just did with the Lumin power amp. So to give you an idea why this power amp wowed me, I'll tell you a few stories. So let me start by playing this sound demo. It might get a bit loud, so be ready. Now this song, I listened to it for like 2,762 times. Every day I listen to it with all kind of power amp, all kind of setup. But never once did I go like, whoa. You see, the song at one point is very, very quiet, and then it suddenly goes really loud. That transition period was what blew me away with this power amp. The instantaneous delivery of power, the torque, the no hesitation. I'm sure that a lot of you go like, yeah, but I hear that at my place too, right? Quiet and suddenly very loud, very fast. But all I can say is that I tried a lot of power amps with it, and it never gave me that, whoa, what the hell just happened? You see, I heard that even before I spoke to Angus at Lumin. So when they told me that a lot of time was spent in designing the amp to deliver instantaneous power, that's where I go like, oh, now I get it. Now this, I never heard it with another power amp. I'm talking about even $10,000 power amps that I've tried at my place. But this is something that you have to live with the power amp for a long time, trying all kind of music to suddenly recognize it. And when I first heard it, I was not paying attention to the music because, you know, after hearing it for 2,782 times, you really don't care. And for it to suddenly catch my attention, that's what wowed me. Now, another thing that really impressed me with this power amp is that it has very dark background. Maybe I should define what I mean, my definition of what dark background is. It's simply just that the instruments really jump out from the background. That's all it means in my case. Maybe that's not the official right definition, but that's my definition. And I remember one day I had it set up with the Lumin T2 directly to the power amp, the Lumin power amp, with the Gershman Avant-Garde speakers, and then the source was the Inuit Zenith. So that was a really high-end setup. And I was listening to this song, and let me put the name of the song here on the screen. I listened to that song 3 times. And the reason I did that was not to listen to the song, but to listen to that one instrument that's playing somewhere really far in the background, that chick, 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 chick sound. I don't know what that instrument is called, but it was very clear And it's like I have a Star Trek replicator, and it was replicating that one instrument. And for me, it was an experience, because even with all the setup I have, I don't usually experience this. To be able to really pinpoint one instrument and to feel that it materialized in my room, that was very unique. With others, even if I hear that faint sound, it doesn't have that strong 3D feel. And for me, this is where the separation comes in between entry level and high end. And also, maybe because it has very dark background, I'm able to listen to it at very low volume. And that is something you have to try at your home, to listen at very low volume and yet able to hear everything. Usually when I play with gear at this level, there's no real con. Rather, it's a question of taste. Because in general, they do everything well. At this price, you expect it to do fantastic. Rather, the problem is more a question of synergy. That's my experience. And when you're playing at this level, you're more picky. That's why we say it's easier to get budget gear to sound good than high-end gear to sound good, because equipment matching is important. They're so resolving, they're so detailed that when something's a bit off, you can really pick it up. Now, in this case, let me tell you a story, okay? Now, to help me evaluate this unit, I have my friend Mr. Quad, Mr. DIY, and Mr. Kanta listen to this amp at their place. Now, they're no stranger to high-end gear. If you look at Mr. DIY's power amp, for example, he has a Hegel H30. That's a $15,000 power amp. So for them, the Lumin, it's normal. When they try at their home, I lent them with my Modwright LS100, and they're like, well, it's very good, sounds fantastic. They do wish that the soundstage was bigger. That's one thing they notice. And when I spoke to Mr. Kanta, he was like, I don't think so. I didn't hear a problem with the soundstage. But here's the thing. When I lent it to Mr. Kanta, in the beginning, when he wrote me his thoughts on the power amp, he was like, it's good. You know, $10,000, what do you expect? After a while, he wrote back and he said, you know, Thomas, I am going to sell my Mcintosh MC302. I want to buy this Lumin power amp. And I'm like, all right, so what changed? Turns out, in the beginning, he tried it with his Mcintosh 2 preamp. I think the MC2300, MC2005, I forget. Anyway, one of those preamp. And he said with that match, it was good. And then he tried it with his Mcintosh C47. That match was good. But when he put in the Audio Research LS25, that's when he go like, OMG, I am selling my power amp, I'm getting this instead. So Mr. Kanta told me, Thomas, this Lumin amp does everything better than my Mcintosh MC302. Now usually when we compare amps, we say, okay, this one's better at this, that one's better at that. But he said, in this case, no man, every single thing, this Lumin beats it. The only thing the Mcintosh has the advantage, it's when it comes to continuous bass output and bass weight. Everything else, the Lumin is better when driving his Focal Sopra 2. Unfortunate for him, he can't live with the Mcintosh MC302 anymore. So later on, Mr. Kanta lent me his Audio Research LS25. I tried it in my place. 10 seconds is all it took, and I go like, okay, damn, it is much better than my Modwright LS100. At least the pairing was. And we're like, maybe the Modwright LS100 has a richer sound, a fatter sound, is warmer. So it's not that good of a match with the Lumin power amp, because Lumin power amp is a very lively amp. It's the kind of amp that makes you want to dance. The LS Research is leaner, it's faster, it's more neutral, and that was a better match. So that's where I go like, okay, I get it. And that's the thing with playing high-end gear. Equipment matching is very important. Sometimes when you play this level, things are so revealing that changing one cable can be the difference between wow and it's good. So just something for you to think about, and that was our experience. All right, so let's wrap it up at this point. Now, to be frank, I was actually quite surprised at how good this amp is at controlling a lot of the speakers I tried it with. Usually, you know, I expect a good power amp to be the size of a microwave, the weight of a refrigerator, but this amp is nothing like that. Really small, high wife approval factor, and not too heavy. And that's what shocked me when I first got it. I'm like, really? This this is $13,000. It doesn't weight like a $13,000 amp, but it performs incredibly. The first time I ever heard it was at the Montreal Audio Show. I was driving this pair of PMC Fenestra speaker. They're top of the line. They were humongous. And I was like, what? This small little amp is driving these big speakers with authority? And that's where I wish I can bring this home one day. And thanks to my YouTube channel, I got this chance to try it at my place. So for those of you who are shopping for a power amp in this price bracket, put it on your shopping list. You might be really impressed with what this power amp can do. Especially those who own audio research preamps, you gotta try with this power amp. See you next time.
Eyes glow like two fires, moving so graceful. Wildcat in the jungle with dangerous claws. Movement she anticipates, a sight is set on her prey. Like stars in the darkest night, crystallized, fascinating. If you wanna stay alive, if you don't wanna be her prey, don't stand in her way. Run, run, run away. Crystallize, 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 watching her prey. Crystallize, crystallize, fascinating. Eyes glow like two fires, movement so graceful. Wildcat in the jungle with dangerous claws. Movement she anticipates, a sight is set on her prey. Like stars in the darkest night, crystallized, fascinating. If you wanna stay alive, if you don't wanna be her prey, don't stand in her way. Run, run, run away. Crystallize, 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 watching her prey. Crystallize, 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 fascinating. Sorry.